The Sales Proformance Show, your source of inspiration in the world of sales and business development. Here we blend cutting-edge sales strategies with personal development, helping you achieve not just professional success, but also personal fulfillment. You'll hear from the experts to help unlock your true potential. And now here's your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to the Sales Proformance Podcast Show. I am your host, David Sliman. And I want to thank everybody for your support out there. We're getting subscribers, we're getting likes, people are sharing the show, and it's been some great stuff. So today, listen, we have a distinguished guest who has carved a remarkable path in the franchise world. Now, if you want to talk franchising, this is the podcast for you today. We're going to go through history. We're going to talk about currently what's going on in the franchise world. And our guest, Mariruth Kennedy, is a seasoned franchise consultant and the founder of Kennedy Franchise Consultants. With years of experience, she has such a keen insight to the franchise world. And she's a trusted authority. Listen, I worked with her years back, and we've stayed in touch through the years for reasons like this, because she's a true pro. She's passionate about helping people get into the right franchise. She's worked with franchisors to help them develop their brands. She's coached franchise consultants. And today we're going to delve into the past, present, and future of the franchise business. So whether you're considering owning a franchise or ever thought about starting your own franchise, this is going to be a great podcast. And without further ado, I would like to welcome you, Mariruth. Welcome to the Sales Proformance Show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, we'll start off real quick here. A lot to go over and a lot to dig into, but can you tell us about your journey in the world of franchising and really what has inspired you to get to this point today?
Yeah, sure. So I really started my career in marketing, and then in the early 2000s, moved to the company where we both met, and we took it into franchising. It had not been a franchise before that; it had been kind of a affiliate, and then and I learned a lot about franchising. I was really fortunate to sort of be taken under the wing of a few folks who had significant franchise experience. In fact, one of the people was the then president of the IFA, the International Franchise Association. So I had a lot of on-the-job training, but then working with some folks. And then I left kind of that world, started my own digital agency in like 2009 or 10 when really nobody was doing that. But as I was kind of getting to a point where I'm like, well, what do I want to be what do I want to do as sort of the last chapter? It was, I kind of looked back on my career and said, it was franchising that I really loved. And that's when I got back into franchise consulting in 2017. So I was able to use all of my experience of, the franchising, consulting, and bringing that back around. So, so that was kind of my journey with it. And I just love, like you said in the opening, I just love helping people find something that's right for them and helping them, kind of through the process. So this was perfect for me.
Yeah. And we've talked about that in the past. And again, we've stayed in touch through the years just because either I was bouncing ideas off you or we were connecting about business things. And more importantly, that is one thing that holds true with you is you really want to help people get into the right franchise. So that kind of leads me into the next question here, which is, what if someone is thinking about getting into business for themselves? And again, I'm just going to give my perspective really quick here. I was lucky enough at an early age to get into the franchise business where we met. And it was a great springboard for me because I feel at 24 years old, if I would have just jumped into business, I might have drowned it a little bit. And the franchise model obviously gives you a framework. But what do you believe are the key advantages in investing in a franchise business compared to starting an independent venture?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that people ask a lot. A lot of times people will be like, well, I'll just start my own. Why should I pay a franchise fee? Right. And for somebody who maybe is a really seasoned entrepreneur maybe a franchise isn't the right thing. Maybe it is. I mean, I get plenty of folks like that who have multiple franchises. Say franchises are like a tattoo. Very rarely do you meet somebody with just one of them. So, but as far as I think the benefits are, there is the framework, there's training, there's coaching, and there's branding. I mean, when you look at a good franchise and the branding that they have in place, for the average person to go out and recreate that, it's going to cost them the franchise fee, because if you've started businesses, a really good branding program with your website and your trucks or your location and your brochures and everything, that isn't $20. That's $20, $30, $40, $50,000 easily. And there you are right to your franchise fee, but you don't have all of the other aspects to it. So, so what I say to people is, sure, you can go start your business, but it's the difference between, starting your own business and a franchise, kind of the difference between going out in the backyard and rubbing two sticks together to start a fire, or putting a lot of wood there, and I'm from Jersey, throwing gasoline on it, lighting it on fire, right? Both of them are going to give you fire, but one's going to accelerate a lot more quickly.
Not quickly. Yeah. And if you've got someone who's out there listening right now and maybe they've thought about it, or maybe they haven't thought about it and this has jarred it, but if someone's looking at a franchise right now to get involved with, when you meet with someone for the first time, what are some of the things you ask them, and what should they be looking for when getting involved with a franchise brand?
Right. And those are really two questions, right?
Yeah,
I think one is, that's okay. One is, what do? I want to get to know the person, right? Because sometimes people come with, I want a restaurant, or I had somebody once, I want a retail location because I have a kid and I want to spend time with them. And I'm like, okay, well, those two things are not going to mesh. So I want to understand what their goals are, right? Like their lifestyle. What do they want that to look like? I want to know, what kind of earnings they're looking for down the road. I want to know what they've done. I want to know their hobbies. I placed somebody one time, she's a nursing supervisor. And I found out her hobby was taking things from where she lived, buying them, sending them to Jamaica, where she was from, and they were being resold. And this was her hobby, right? It had nothing to do with what she was looking at with businesses. But once I found that out, I found out that I knew we had in our portfolio basically a consignment kind of business. Thrifting.
Yeah.
And I presented it to her and she went through the roof. And not only that, but she had been a shopper at one of their locations and never realized it was a franchise that she could buy from. She wound up buying that business and was over the moon because it was a passion of hers, but she didn't even know that kind of business existed. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, if someone's think about what your passion is, what's something you like, something you can see yourself doing each and every day. Sure.
Well, for some people, people, they call and they're like, I don't care if the money's green, I'm into it. Right. So that's why I want to get to know who they are. For some people, it's just about, I want to build a business. All right. Like I want to take my experience and I want to build a business, and I want to build a business that has this kind of criteria. So I can do both of those, right? Sometimes it's somebody's passion and sometimes it's something like, oh yeah, that feels familiar because my dad was kind of in that industry in a different way or something like that. So that's why it's important to get to know them. As far as what to look for, I think again, it depends on you. If you're a new entrepreneur, if you're somebody, particularly somebody who's coming out of corporate after 20 or 30 years, you might need a little more structure. You might not be the person to go into a franchise that only has 3 or 4 locations and doesn't have a really strong training and development and marketing and all of that. They're still kind of putting those pieces together. Yeah. Somebody like you who's, started and run multiple businesses, you could get in there and you could get under the hood and help them, right? But somebody who's just starting out, I would stay away from, even if you get really excited about it, I wouldn't want that person to be franchise number 4 or 5.
Early.
Maybe franchise 30, right? But franchise 4 or 5, there's a lot usually going on. The one caveat to that, I think, would be if you are working with a really experienced franchisor who has multiple brands and they know how to bring a brand to market and they've got everything buttoned up, like a Neighborly or something like that. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But generally, I think that's one of the things to kind of stay away from is a brand new franchise if you're really new to business.
Yeah, that's a great point. Make sure you do your due diligence. And if they've only got 4 units or 5 units and you're really green in the idea of getting it done, I think that's a huge point to take for sure. All right, so let's flip it. See a lot of franchises out there, right? People, they're running a business and they go, we can franchise this thing. Okay. Right. Listen, I created a franchise.
I've done that, right?
I was like, well, listen, I'm a franchisee of this brand. I mean, how hard can it be to learn everything? How hard can it be to turn this into a franchise? Let me tell you, it is a mountain. Okay.
It is.
And luckily I didn't know what I didn't know at that point. But no, there was a lot of great stuff that came. I mean, I learned so much doing that. I mean, you can't pull that out of any textbook, any classroom, anything. And it really sharpened everything that I have today. But if you're a business owner and you're thinking about franchising your company, talk to me about that. What are some of the things you should be thinking about?
So the first thing is make sure that you have really successful either additional offices or your own, your location has to be buttoned up and you have to have a proven concept.
Yeah.
And if you have multiple locations, either you've kind of partnered, you've created affiliates, whatever it is, right? You have multiple locations, make sure they're buttoned up and that they will validate well, right? If somebody calls them, they're going to be like, oh yeah, this thing is great. I think the second thing is make sure you're funded well enough to do it because it isn't cheap, as you know.
It costs cheap.
Way more than you expect. And I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is it's kind of like the E-Myth, right? If you jump into a business because you love that business, you may not be doing that business anymore.
That's right.
When you become a franchisor, you are no longer in whatever business you were in. You are now in the business of being a franchisor and taking care of your franchisees.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. I want everybody to rewind that who's thinking about franchising their business, because what you said is so true. If you're running a business and it's a plumbing company and you were doing a lot of that stuff and you're building, you are not going to be doing that anymore. Okay. Nope. Sorry to cut in, but I wanted to make sure that's profound because rewind that, go back to it, put a star on it. And I'm not discouraging anybody to do. I think it's absolutely a fantastic model and a great way to grow, but just the expectations and advice going in.
You have to know that's what you're going to be spending your time on. Like every waking moment is supposed to be about how am I supporting, training, coaching, finding marketing ideas, doing R&D. How am I doing everything to help my franchisees grow? Yes. I'll grow if I help my franchisees grow. But a lot of folks kind of lose sight of that and they don't realize how important it is that that's what they've got to be doing. They have to be focused on their franchisees.
Yeah. And I've seen that morph too, right? Where I've seen some franchises that have done such an exceptional job, not only supporting their franchises, but they evolve to make things better. They come out with new ideas. Yeah. They come out with new revenue ideas, things that will drive revenue streams and all that good stuff. And then the other side of it, I've seen it too, where that's kind of this us against them thing too, if you're not doing it right. And you got to make sure that all your people are aligned with that organizational alignment, the power statement of what the organization is trying to accomplish. And more importantly, like you said, supporting the franchises. That was always first in our eyes. So great.
Yeah, it's really got to be. I think that's something to think about. And like I said, I think really you can't underestimate how much money you're going to have to invest in order to do it. From marketing, right? Like people don't think about how hard you're going to have to work to market your franchise,
Yeah.
right? To be able to get franchisees, not on the other end of marketing for your franchisees, but how are you going to get franchisees? That's not easy. You've got to have somebody who's going to walk them through the process. You're either going to pay brokers or pay for ads or pay, it's a lot of money. So like you, I'm not discouraging somebody from doing it. I'm just saying, don't be that franchise that languishes with 4 franchises for 15 years.
Yes.
And there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
I think the number is something like, and I won't get it exactly right, but I think it's only about 4% of franchises ever grow to more than 50 franchises. It's a very small number. Yeah.
Wow.
And like I said, don't quote me on the specific, but it's a small percentage. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, and I've been to the IFA convention probably a handful of times through my years. And it's funny there's so many franchises out there. You'll see these names. You're like, I never heard of this one. I never heard of that one. I never heard of that one. There's so many.
And the not heard of is actually an interesting, if I can make a point about that. That isn't always a bad thing, right? There are a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I only want a name brand. I only want a McDonald's or a Burger King because I want to become a millionaire. And I'm like, you got to be a millionaire, right? To buy a McDonald's. To buy one of those. I can show you home-based businesses that you may, or home service businesses, chuck in a truck, as we sometimes call them, right? Kind of businesses that don't have that kind of investment, but can flow through very nicely. And they're kind of under the radar. They're not sexy businesses. They're not trendy, but they're just solid and people need them and they're not going to be put out of business by Amazon, So all of that to say that a name isn't always the reason to buy a franchise. Get under the hood and understand how many franchises they have, what their growth is like. Are they losing franchisees? What does their FDD look like, their franchise disclosure document?
Yes.
So all of that. But to your point, I think the last numbers I saw, it's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 franchises in the United States. Wow. They all can't have 100 or 200 franchises.
No way. I mean, and you and I originally, and with my background, came in the marketing and advertising space. And the beauty of those franchises is that there's not a lot of overhead. You don't have to have a lot of people. If you can go out and you can sell and create your brand locally, there's a lot of residual income. There's multiple revenue streams, and you're not paying $200,000 or $300,000 to do a brick and mortar startup. And again, I'm not saying one's bad or the other, but if you're a little tighter on cash and you've got the right, I should say, experience or hobbies, so to speak, there's some good companies out there that just kind of fly under the radar. So that's a great point. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about coaching, because when somebody is interested in the franchise, they obviously reach out to franchise companies. There are companies who, like you said, like what you're doing, you connect with professionals and you navigate them into the right direction. You've had a lot of experience in coaching people who actually navigate that process, correct?
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and what are some of the things that you really focus on?
So, I think you have to focus on a few pieces. One is really helping people understand whether this is what they really want to do or not, right? So sometimes people are kicking the tires and they kind of like the idea they're entrepreneurs, right? They want to be an entrepreneur, but then when they start looking at it, and I don't think I've ever placed somebody who focused on this. Well, what happens if I fail? if they start asking that question, so if you're asking yourself that before you even get started, what happens if I fail? Maybe entrepreneurship isn't for you. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but when people are just focused on that piece, I'm not sure I'd have to really think through, has anybody ever,
Yeah, if
actually pulled the trigger?
right. Yeah, we're all human, right? So we have that doubt in our mind that speaks to us, and we have to handle that in certain ways, especially entrepreneurs like us. I mean, we've got to bury that thing or burn it and then go to a positive thought. But if it's one of the things that's really the anchor of your thought, I agree.
Yeah.
I think you might want to rethink it a little bit.
Exactly. So it's helping people with mindset, right? Like understanding that. The other thing that, and I'm not sure where this fits in, but it's a really important point, and that is that if someone is part of a couple and they're coming in to look at a franchise, I really coach them to get their spouse involved.
Yes.
Because when, not all the time, but there are folks that will go through the process without the support of their spouse. And when it comes down to the end, they can't pull the trigger.
They can't. They go, what is this? Whoa. So, what, you were talking about this? Wait a second.
Right? Exactly. So it's kind of it is and it's often demoralizing to that person because they kind of just thought they were going to have the support, but they didn't. So I think that's a real challenge for folks in terms of thinking about things, so there's coaching them through that. There's coaching them through understanding what their strengths are, where they're going to have some challenges. It's coaching them in how to talk with the franchisor sometimes. Sometimes people go in very adversarial to a franchisor.
Yeah.
And it surprises me every time. And we really have to coach that, you're being interviewed by that franchise. Right? They're not just it's not like going in and buying a house, right? Like you go, oh, I like that house. I want to buy it. You bid enough money, you're going to get the house, right? Or a car. But with a franchise, as you know, it's a little different. That franchise wants to make sure that you're a right fit.
Yeah.
Again, I would say this is sort of a thing to look at too, if you're looking at a franchise. If they're just like taking everybody and they're not putting you through some rigors, that would be a red flag for me, because that may mean they're just taking the money, right? Like maybe they don't really, because the good franchises have a system in place where they're running you through a system. They're talking with you in a certain manner, a certain steps that they're putting you through to make sure that you're a right fit and you're able to follow the system so that you have a better likelihood of success.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, some of the franchises that I've worked with, and even ours, on that first, there should be expectations set on the steps of what the process looks like from the beginning. And if they don't have that, well, then, you might want to think about it a little bit more and dig in or ask more questions. So going back to the franchise coaches, franchise consultants, if you're thinking about getting into the franchise world and selling franchises, listen, there's so many brands out there, right? I mean, there's so many. What, again, on the responsibility on us who would sell a franchise, what is the responsibility on us too to go into the companies and really deep dive and find out, man, what makes you different? What because everyone likes to paint the bright picture, right?
Yeah. So as a franchise consultant, I think one of the things for people to know is I don't sell franchises, right? I basically act as a matchmaker.
Yes.
Kind of like a real estate agent does, right? I have properties that I represent, and I'm going to help you, the buyer, And also like an agent, I'm not paid by the buyer, I'm paid by the seller.
Right.
So somebody can come to me, get all of this advice, all of the coaching, and it doesn't cost them a dime. They don't pay any more to the franchise to deal with me. They don't pay any less. They just pay the same fee they would pay. But what I do is I'm part of an affiliate of several hundred franchise consultants or brokers, and there's a corporate office that actually vets the hundreds of franchises that I represent, brings them in. However, my job is to, we have webinars with all of these brands. We have relationships. We have multiple opportunities through the year through, kind of quarterly conventions, if you will, and then a big annual convention where we get to meet, and we'll have 100 or so franchisors in there. I will go through FDDs. There are times when I've looked at FDDs and I'm like, that's not looking good. They're losing people, right and left, and
the revenue is not there.
And they got a lot of litigation in there, So, and you can call and you can talk to the franchisors, but I want to make sure that I'm giving folks the best information. It's their job to do the due diligence, but I want to point them in the direction of how best to do that. I can't give them financial advice. I can't give them legal advice. I have folks that they can talk to, but I can say, hey, make sure that you pay attention to, 3, 5, and 7 in the FDD, that's where you're going to find that.
Look at it. Yeah. Pay attention to it. So let me ask you this question. How has the franchise industry evolved over the years? And that's the first question. And I'll ask another one after that, but I'll let you answer that one.
Tell me a little bit more about evolved.
Like the trends, how the trends of the industry, how do you see shaping in the future? I mean, what do you think, 10 years ago in selling franchises, how has it evolved more today, if it has at any? And, what do you see in the future for the franchise industry?
Yeah, well, I think the growth of franchise consultants has been pretty big. So there's a lot more of us out there doing this, helping people get into the franchise. There are a lot more franchises out there in a lot of different industries. I think some of the trends we're seeing is home services have really become kind of a leader, and they're single services, dryer vent cleaning, closets, painting, as opposed to handyman or, the things that kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And part of that has been driven by Google, because it's a lot easier to optimize for a dryer vent business than it is for, something sort of across the board.
So
because
broad.
What are people Googling, right? Like if I need a plumber, I'm not Googling handyman, I'm Googling plumber, right? So I think that's been one of the trends. I think there are just more home-based businesses because people have gotten used to that, and it doesn't have, I think for a long time, home-based business had this sort of stigma of, envelope stuffing or something, right? Where,
right.
Today you can find some businesses that are, multi-million-dollar businesses that are somebody's running out of an office in their home. They just need a computer. I think technology has changed franchising a lot. The better franchisors are using everything from, point of sale, to quoting and interactive virtual reality. I mean, it's all coming into play.
It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. It used to be if you were selling blinds for one of the franchise blind companies, you brought some swatches. Today, you can visualize that in that person's home. Right.
Good example.
So there's just so many different things where all of that has come into play. I think technology has been huge. I think the other thing that has happened is, and I'll call it the professionalization of blue collar businesses.
Yeah.
So because of technology, some of these businesses that have historically been considered blue collar businesses, I'll use painting as an example, right? Through franchising, these businesses have been professionalized in a way that people who are coming out of corporate with a lot of management background can take all of the data, can take the the technology, and from customer service all the way through to quoting, to billing, to follow up, they are looking at all of the KPIs and all of the data and figuring out how do they use that to leverage the business to grow to multi-million-dollar painting businesses,
Yes.
right? They're not putting paint on the wall. They know how to manage people. And I think the combination of the companies building this professionalism into it, that people who are managers are able to look at that and go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. For instance, there's a cleaning company, I think it's 60 or 65%, home cleaning, residential cleaning, 60 or 65% of their owners have MBAs.
Wow.
You wouldn't think that, right?
Yeah.
But they know that this is a business that, think about it, it has recurring revenue. It's got labor costs, but it doesn't have products. It's not got significant inventory.
Really good.
So there's a lot of businesses out there, back to my earlier comment about it's not sexy, but it's steady. And right now, Amazon still can't, isn't coming in and cleaning your house for you. Give them time. So
right.
I'm not knocking them. Their stock is up a lot today, and I'm happy. But I think those are things to think about.
Think about for sure. All right, 2 last questions. The first one is, so if I am an employee right now, and I've been thinking about getting into the franchise business, right? And, I want to transition from being an employee of a company to ultimately a franchisee. I think it goes back to some of the stuff we said earlier. What should they be thinking about?
So the first thing is risk, right? Like how tolerant are they of risk, right? I think they should be talking to their spouse and saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Get that support, think it together. They should plan on going through the process with their spouse.
Yes.
So that both people are on the same page. I heard somebody say, otherwise our spouses are like heat-seeking missiles to know. So, like sometimes they feel like it's their job to play devil's advocate. So, and you don't want that situation. I heard somebody else say, Satan doesn't need representation. So, so we can leave the devil's advocate at the door. But I think that's something to think about. Think about how they're going to feel as they're not being paid. So, so I say to people, you know what, put whatever money you need for the next year to pay yourself, put that aside in a bank account that's going to help pay you so you don't feel like, oh, I'm not being paid, right? Because as you know, a lot of times you're not getting paid out of your business in the first 6 months or times a year, depending on the business. You may, if you cash flow well, there are businesses that cash flow more quickly than others. I think you've got to think about just what is that going to look like for the day-to-day. Think about the kinds of businesses. Think about talking to a franchise consultant who can help you think through things. One of the things I hear most often when I do my consultations with people is, gee, I never thought about that. Right? There are things that, how many employees do you want? What kind of employees? Do you want white collar employees, blue collar employees? Do you want hourly employees? Do you want somebody who's skilled? What are the pros and cons of that? Like, you've got to be thinking about all of these things. And that's what, I'm not pitching myself here, but that's what a broker or consultant is going to help you do, is think through all of those kinds of things.
That's the experience right there. I mean, that's why we're talking about this today. So that's fantastic. All right. One last question.
Got it.
Are there any valuable resources or tools that people who are aspiring to get into the franchise world or own their own franchise can use to educate themselves for more of an informed decision? Is there anything out there that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I have a franchise book that I used to have at the top of my head, and I can't think of that. I will post that to you.
Okay.
The IFA, the International Franchise Association, of course, is a great resource. There's so much online. If you Google, buying a franchise, reach out to a franchise consultant.
Yeah.
And if the franchise consultant, you guys have to have a rapport. So if you feel like they're just rote or they're just kind of going through it, or worse, I know some folks will do that. If you call me about a franchise, a particular brand, or you come into me as a lead, I'm not going to just send you to that brand. I'm going to talk to you. And I will tell you that 92% of the time, because I do track this, 92% of the time, people never go to that franchise. It's just a button they clicked.
Yep.
But it wasn't right at all.
Yep.
But so many franchise consultants will just send you to that brand because it's easy for them.
Easy, yep. Makes
Getting
sense.
to know you, understanding what you're all about, helping look at some, working together with that person in a partnership will go a long way to getting you what you need. And it doesn't cost you anything.
Right. Exactly. That's the biggest thing. Just time at that point. Right. So I agree with you. I think if you're getting a sense that someone's just trying to get the deal or something, like you can pick that up, because just what you've talked about today, just the idea of digging into hobbies and going above and beyond and trying to really find a match versus just make a sale, I think is huge. So that's been fantastic. This has been so much fun. I've enjoyed. I'm promise you, there are people out there who have learned a lot. I've learned some stuff today, which has been great.
That's awesome.
And I want to thank you for being on the show. And for everybody out there, check us out at salesproformance.com. Like this show, subscribe to it. And Mariruth, if someone wants to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Okay. Or they can certainly reach out on my website, kennedyfranchiseconsultants.com.
kennedyfranchiseconsultants.com. Check her out on LinkedIn as well. If you have any questions whatsoever, you're thinking about buying a franchise, you're thinking about franchising, she's a true pro, a great resource, and a great friend. And I appreciate you being on today. So
Thanks,
everybody
Dave.
out there, keep going pro. And sorry, Mariruth, go ahead. Finish it out.
No, I was just saying thank you. You take good care.
All right, thank you.